This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories: discrimination or protecting fair play. Caster Semenya challenges plans to regulate female athletes' testosterone levels.
The regulations that we are introducing are there to protect the sanctity of fair and open competition.
Democracy delayed as elections in Nigeria are rescheduled. President Muhammadu Buhari urges security operatives to be ruthless with vote riggers. I am Peter Okwoche and I'll be live from Abuja.
Also in the program, poise and skill. Young people in Nairobi getting a buzz from the thrilling and daring world of parkour.
I always had this energy that I always wanted something to do with it. And I played a lot of sports, but I didn't feel like that was really pushing myself, my body, my mind.
And in sport, he's been sweeping up accolades, but can Kenya's Eliud Kipchoge pick up another one at the Laureus Sports Awards in Monaco today? Thank you for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The South African runner Caster Semenya is taking on Sports International governing body, the IAAF, over plans to regulate testosterone levels in female athletes. BBC's Sports News correspondent Richard Conway is at the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland and sent us this report.
You have to walk before you can run. Caster Semenya's journey has brought her all the way to sport's highest court. The South African 800-metre runner is challenging new regulations which will require female athletes with naturally high testosterone levels to take medication to lower the hormone prior to competing. Her lawyers claim that is discriminatory, arguing hyperandrogenism, a condition characterized by higher levels of male sex hormones, is naturally occurring.
The whole week is going to be important. Obviously, the evidence will be evaluated and assessed at the end of the process this week. So today is the start.
Morning, Loco. Athletics governing body, the IAAF, says it must act, given its belief elevated testosterone levels provide female runners significant performance advantages over their rivals.
The core value for the IAAF is the empowerment of girls and women through athletics. The regulations that we are introducing are there to protect the sanctity of fair and open competition.
This case has been a long time in the making. In 2009, Caster Semenya won her first world title. In 2011, the IAAF introduced its first hyperandrogenism regulations. But in 2015, the regulations were suspended when an Indian sprinter, Dutee Chand, won her case against them. Then in 2017, the IAAF published new research and said medication to counter the effects from differences of sexual development must be taken. The Olympic champion, meanwhile, has long maintained what she sees as her right to run. A judgment in this case is expected by late March, and the outcome will have far-reaching implications for Caster Semenya's competitive future, alongside important issues of ethics and gender within her sport. Richard Conway, BBC News, Lausanne.
Well, South African sports journalist Mohammed Ali joins us from Cape Town. Mohammed, this is one case that has held the attention of South Africa and indeed the attention of the world of sport. And there are questions around the moral and, the ethical issues surrounding the case. What are the arguments?
Well, the IAAF feels, based on their research, that athletes with different sexual development, like Caster Semenya, for example, is obviously the most high-profile example. The higher levels of testosterone gives them a performance advantage, and they would like to level the playing field, as it were, by getting athletes like Caster Semenya to take medication to bring their testosterone levels down and level the playing field. Caster Semenya and her supporters, of whom there are very many, virtually the entire South Africa, say that it's not her fault that she was born with this genetic advantage, and it's all natural. Why should particularly when the IAAF is doping. Why should she be taking an unnatural substance to bring her natural testosterone levels down?
Just quite quickly, what are the wider implications of this, however this case goes? Because people are wondering, what could this really mean?
Well, if Caster Semenya does lose the case and there are other athletes with a similar condition, it would mean that they would either have to participate against male athletes, or they would have to take the medication at least 6 months prior to competition to bring their testosterone levels down. If Caster Semenya does win the case, it would mean that she would be able to compete as she has done, and the other athletes like Tuti Chand, the Indian sprinter, would be able to compete with their natural condition as they have been doing over the past few years.
All right, Moali for us there in Cape Town. Thank you. Well, let's now take a quick look at other stories making the headlines across Africa. Somalia has rejected an accusation by Kenya that it has auctioned off oil and gas blocks in a disputed maritime area. It said the oil fields in the Indian Ocean were in its own waters and none had been auctioned. At the weekend, Kenya recalled its envoy from Somalia and expelled the Somali ambassador over the dispute. Now, a court in Harare has convicted a leading Zimbabwean opposition figure for falsely announcing the results of last year's presidential election. Tendai Biti, a senior MDC leader and former finance minister, was ordered to pay $200 or serve a week in jail. Now, last year, before an official announcement, Mr. Biti declared the MDC leader Nelson Chamisa the winner. In Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the country's major political parties have been the subject of a cyber attack. Australia's security agencies believe a sophisticated state actor was responsible for the hack earlier this month, which also breached Parliament's computer systems. Mr. Morrison says Australia has acted decisively to protect its national interests and there's no evidence of electoral interference. To Nigeria now, where the presidential election has been postponed. Investigations have been ordered, schedules rearranged, and none of it disguising the fact that this is the third election in a row to be delayed. Let's now go to Abuja, where my colleague Peter Okwoche is monitoring developments for us. Peter.
Many thanks, Sophie. Well, welcome to Abuja, where today both the ruling APC and the main opposition PDP have been meeting at a caucus level to discuss the implications of these postponed elections. As you mentioned, on Saturday they were meant to hold, but just 5 hours before people were meant to go to the polls, the elections were shifted till next Saturday. Well, apart from both parties condemning the Independent National Electoral Commission, President Muhammadu Buhari had a message for would-be vote riggers.
Anybody who decides to snatch boxes or lead thugs to disturb it, maybe that's the last local action you will take. I really give the military and the police.
And I must say, Sophie, that those comments from President Muhammadu Buhari have been condemned by some quarters here in Abuja. Another person who's been having his say on the postponed elections is the head of the African Union Observer Mission here in Nigeria, in the person of the former Ethiopian Prime Minister, Haile Mariam Desalegn. I spoke to him recently and asked him what his views on the postponement was.
I think it's the preparation has been good, and the problems has come at the tip of the things. And the remaining 5 days, they assured us if they go according to the plan they presented to us, it will be done.
Now, some of the parties have actually agreed with INEC, for the postponement, but the two main parties, the ruling APC and the PDP, have said that they're really angry at the postponement. Do you think this somehow reduces the credibility of the Independent National Electoral Commission?
I think, first of all, we understand why they are angry. Not only them, we as observers, when you come out to observe in the morning, when you hear about that the election is postponed, but given the whole preparation so far, And given the democratic discourse in Nigeria, that the campaign has gone so far in a peaceful manner. So it means that the leaders has to be calm and stable at this time to make the next postponed election period to be successful.
This is the third election in a row that has been postponed in Nigeria. In 2011, it was postponed while people were already voting. 2015, it was postponed for about 6 weeks due to security challenges. Why do you think Nigeria is not learning lessons from its past?
My personal opinion is that it's a failure to conceive that there are structural problems in the process itself. If you see, we in Africa, in most cases, we do not understand the complexity of logistics. And when the time comes without preparation, we start grapple in such a way that we try, but we somehow fail. Our view is that INEC needs a serious reform in the future. But for now, I think this is an emergency situation and they have to be vigilant enough to bring about the required competence in the coming remaining days.
That's the former Ethiopian Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn. He's also the African Union's chief observer here for the Nigerian elections. Now, those reforms that he talks about have been on the lips of most Nigerians this morning. All the talk shows on TV and on radio saying something needs to be done about INEC. And that's because people are really angry. People had made plans. People had traveled last weekend. They'll have to come back to their stations now and perhaps, if they can afford to, travel again at the weekend. My colleague Maya Hayakawa has been looking at the cost of this postponement to Nigerians.
Government have messed us up.
Kem and her mother are discussing what to do after her wedding date became the new election day. The $12,000 ceremony is now postponed because all roads will be closed and the losses are mounting.
We know that we're starting afresh with the plans because vendors now, they feel like they're doing us a big favor.
Nicholas, how do you feel?
I'm just frustrated. I mean, planning a wedding is hard enough. Then you have things coming in that you can't control. It's crazy. I mean, like I said, I haven't slept for other weeks. And now it's just even worse. I don't know what to do. All my plans are down the drain. It's crazy. I mean,
on a normal day, this fueling station would be extremely busy. However, today, roads are empty, businesses are shut. The postponement of the election means this is likely to happen twice, meaning there'd be 2 lost days of business.
The postponement of the election has cost the economy an estimated $1.5 billion. And this is based on the estimated daily output of this economy.
The size of Nigeria's economy surpassed $400 billion last year, and the disruption to business, lost income, as well as reduced consumer spending during the aborted election means huge losses. Locked doors of shops in Africa's largest oil producer and arguably the continent's biggest economy is no different from pouring money down the drain. This is considered Africa's most expensive election, with a budget of $522.8 million. SPM Intelligence estimates that the Electoral Commission will now have to spend an additional $17.1 million to conduct the postponed elections. Maya Hayakawa, BBC News, Abuja.
So really a huge cost there, Peter, as we've had there from Maya. But this is also quite complicated for the INEC because now they have to collect, nearly 200,000 electronic scanners and reprogram them.
Absolutely, and that's, according to the chairman of INEC, that was the reason behind them having to postpone it so far along. I mean, they were thinking of probably holding the elections on Monday or on Sunday or on Monday, but because of these scanners, now, according to the IT department of INEC, it takes 5 days to reprogram these scanners. There are about 180,000 of them, and you've got to get people to do them manually. And once INEC realized that it would take that long to reprogram these scanners, they decided to move the elections to Saturday.
Peter, we spoke at the weekend, and of course we were asking many questions about the ballots themselves that are at polling stations, and of course how disappointed Nigerians really are. You have been speaking to a lot of your friends and a lot of people in Abuja. What are they telling you?
Well, Sophie, people are not happy at all. I mean, on Saturday, even despite the postponement, I went out to check some of the polling stations, and people who hadn't heard. Don't forget that this announcement was made at 2:44 in the morning. So some Nigerians hadn't heard and had come out to polling stations. And the one that touched my heart the most was a man who was in a wheelchair. And because there was no vehicular movement, he had wheeled himself 5 kilometers to this polling station only to find out that the voting had been postponed. So yes, indeed, Nigerians are very disappointed, but a lot of them are being patient with INEC and are just hoping for a free, fair, credible and peaceful elections.
All right, Peter Okwoche for us in Abuja. Thank you. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come in sport, a landmark day for the NBA in Africa with its commitment to growing the game on the continent. I'm Sophie Ikenye, and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top stories on this program: should high testosterone levels be regulated in female athletes? South African sprinter Caster Semenya challenges the World Athletics governing body over their proposal. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari says he has ordered the police and the military to be ruthless with vote riggers following the last-minute postponement of the general election. Critics said his comments condoned jungle justice. Fresh polls are expected to be held on the 23rd of February. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Time now for some sport with Mimi.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Some of the biggest names in the world of sport will be in Monaco today for the Laureus Sports Awards. Kenya's Eliud Kipchoge is up for the Sportsman of the Year after he smashed the world marathon record last year in Berlin. Many more legends will also be in attendance. One such legend who will be there is former Olympic champion Morocco's Nawal El Moutawakel, who's also a member of the International Olympic Committee. Ahead of the big event, she called for female equality at Olympics.
Today we are nearly 50%, and at the Olympic Games in Tokyo we are going to reach, I hope, that 50%. I am looking forward to see massive participation of women, a massive, not only in the field area as competitors, but also women in leadership position. We really must have that implemented in everybody's mind, and it is the only way that we can go forward.
The NBA, along with basketball's world body, FIBA, is set to launch a professional league in Africa come January 2020. The Basketball Africa League, as it will be known, will feature 12 teams from across the continent with at least 6 African countries. And former U.S. President Barack Obama has thrown his support behind it. Sports consultant in Nairobi, Cynthia Mumbo, who has worked on several NBA projects, speaks about what role basketball can play amongst one of the most popular sports.
I imagine that football is a good status, so it's going to be very difficult to outseat football. But with sports, there's space for everybody. So depending on what the NBA choose to do, then in my mind, I'm very clear that there's enough space, and they're going to just pick and strategically position themselves in the minds of who they want to connect with. In terms of sports and sports business, not too much has been put in commercially behind sport in Africa, and so it'd be interesting to see what the NBA wants to do.
Staying with basketball, the NBA All-Star took place this weekend in North Carolina. It saw the best of the Eastern and Western conferences go head-to-head. Cameroon's Joel Embiid over there was one of the African stars that took part but was on the losing side. That's because Team LeBron won it 178 to Team Giannis 164. Ahead of the games, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver spoke about African talents such as Embiid that are products of their programs in Africa.
But with the Basketball Without Borders camps or with the academies that we've opened now in Africa, India, and China, the notion is that we can play a much more direct role in the development of players. And if we get to them, boys and girls, at a younger age, we can begin teaching them not just fundamentals, but the values of this game, helping build character around the game, teaching them about their bodies, teaching them the importance of nutrition and sleep and stretching and physical fitness. And we're seeing success with that. You know, certainly you point to the number of players in this league who've come through Basketball Without Borders. We're already seeing some early success with our academy in Africa.
And moving on to football, celebrations for Mali as they won the Under-20 Men's Africa Cup of Nations on Sunday. They had to go to a penalty shootout to win over Senegal 3-2 in Niger, where the tournament was held. The third-place match on Saturday also went to penalties, South Africa winning it 5-3 over Nigeria. And finally, a big FA Cup tie later today in West London as Chelsea hosts Manchester United in the 5th round for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side. There are injuries with Anthony Martial and Jesse Lingard, and the draw for the quarterfinals of the FA Cup will be made after their match. That's all the sports, Sophie.
Maybe just before you go, is it me or is there a particular interest now in basketball in Africa?
You know, football is one of the biggest sports in Africa, but we're seeing the NBA getting more involved, trying to grow the game more in Africa. As we saw there, Cameroon Joel Embiid came through from one of the NBA Africa programs, so they're trying to tap in more into that market. I think it's a great initiative.
And there's potential, there is.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Mimi. Thanks for the sport. Now, parkour or free running started in France in the 1980s, but it's become a popular sport all around the world. In French, it means obstacle course, and that's because it involves running, jumping, and climbing over obstacles using only your physical capabilities. Well, BBC Africa Children's program, What's New, has been speaking to some young enthusiasts in Nairobi about why they love it.
Nice one. Good.
My name is Noah. I'm 13 years old.
My name is Michael. I'm 17.
Parkour is a sport with a sense of freedom that you don't get with other sports.
I always had this energy that I always wanted something to do with it. And I played a lot of sports, but I didn't feel like that was really pushing myself, my body, my mind. So when I started watching YouTube videos of guys doing flips and stuff, that really felt like I could use that adrenaline, really push my body to be able to do these things. It is dangerous, depending on how you do it and who you do it with, because each person has to know their limit, what they can comfortably do, and build on that. So if it's something you can't necessarily do first try, you build it, you work on it to decrease the risks, because if it's done wrong, you can get badly hurt. If parkour became an Olympic sport, it would raise awareness for it so that people wouldn't think it's such a taboo thing to do, that it's a dangerous thing only people who want to muck around do. It'll make it more seen to the public as a more professional thing than guys just playing around. But there are going to be challenges if they're going to do that, like how you would regulate things, how you would keep scores, how you determine who's won what. It's not like gymnastics. It's not how fluent you are, it's not how pointy you are. It's just what you can do. So it'll be a hard thing to judge.
Yes.
Well, that's all from me and the rest of the Focus on Africa team. Thank you for your company.